Hey, everybody, welcome back to this incredibly beautiful room. You know, the crazy thing about a story is we say it to ourselves so many times we start to believe the story is true. Let me explain to you what I'm talking about. I started to make up a story that in this room, I was a different person. In this room, I have one objective only in this room. It's to love and accept people, to listen to people and hear them, and to acknowledge and validate them. And that somehow that objective comes through. So I started to believe that this room itself, there was something special about it. And so I would start out some of my earlier episodes. I would say, welcome back into my magic Zoom room because this room does something. But the truth of the matter, this is an empty room when these people aren't, when LaToya here is not here and I'm not here, it's an empty room. There's nothing magic about this room. What's magic is what happens when we come into this room. And what's magic for me is the promise that I make myself in this room, that I will enter into this room without an agenda, that I want only one thing, to love and accept the person in this room, to listen to them and hear what they're saying, and to acknowledge and validate them. That's what brings magic to this room. The ability to just be able to put myself aside, because I don't do that in my normal day-to-day life. I do it sometimes, but I don't do it. I have to consistently do that in this room because that's the promise I make to people. And I'm a man of my word. I try to honor my word. So my experiment with my own life is, how do I take what happens in this room and make the whole world my room? So that when I'm talking to my brother, who is hard for me to talk to sometimes, when I have an argument with my wife, which we hardly ever have, thank God, but when we have that, when my kids aren't doing what we think they're supposed to be doing and they're doing something else, how do I still show up with all those situations like I show up here? The beauty for me of this show is it's being sponsored by this book over here, The Mosaic. And The Mosaic's the story about a boy who loses his parents 2 years apart on the same day. And when he asks the adults where his parents are, they tell him they're in a place called heaven. So the little boy sets out in search of that place called heaven. But the people he meets along the way surprise him. They're not the clergy and the holy men and women. They're not the Aborigines elders or the medicine women from old. They're common, ordinary people. They're a road worker and a trash man, a blind woman and a homeless guy. And it's in sitting and listening to those people and hearing what they have to say that something changes him over and over and over again, because what he realizes is what he thought they were is not who they are. And it just takes a few minutes of listening to another person to realize what we think someone is isn't who they are, if we would really listen to them. And it made me wonder, what else do I see that way? It isn't really the way it is. What other stories have I told myself? The story I told you about this room. It just isn't true. But I said it so many times I started to believe that story is true. And I would have based I based the creation on that. I would have started building houses and institutions and cities and villages and towns and nations on it. But it just isn't true. What are the stories we tell ourselves that just aren't true? And do we have the beauty of a change of perspective that allows us to see exactly what we've always seen one way, suddenly differently? That's my invitation to you all here who come into this room with us. This isn't just LaToya and I right now in this room. Enter into this conversation with us. Answer the questions for yourself. Listen to LaToya's responses and see what you feel. Comment on the show if you want to. Be a part of it with us. Contact LaToya and ask questions to her. All of her information will be in the show notes. So I feel like a conversation is turning into a soliloquy, and it hasn't ever had a chance to be a conversation. So I am going to shut my mouth up right now and say, LaToya, welcome into this room. Welcome to this conversation. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Today's a really good day, honestly. I'm having a good time listening to you.
Thank you so much. What makes today a really good day?
So far, I've gotten to do my morning walk, which is something that I've discovered I need within the past 2 months. I was missing that sort of solitude. I've always known that I'm an introvert in a lot of ways, but I have um, extrovert tendencies. Like I'm an actress, I'm on YouTube. I love to connect with people, but I think I prefer to have true connections one-on-one. And I like to share my life, but I love the ability of just being able to turn it off and be alone.
Yeah.
And with all of the sort of responsibilities that I make up for myself, and then those that are sort of given to me, I find so much less time to just be with myself. And by the end of the day, I'm so angry or like frazzled or frustrated. And I realize that I need that space for myself and without guilt. And sometimes if I try to create that space for myself inside the house, I end up feeling guilty because I hear my husband with my son, or I hear things around me and I feel like, okay, I need to be doing something. So that's the only way that I can force myself to just sort of have that alone time by myself. And I can choose to listen to podcasts or choose to listen to the world around me. And that really feeds me, so that by the end of the day, when I inevitably feel slightly overwhelmed, it's not as much. So it sort of starts me off on a clean slate. So that's what starts a good day for me. And then it continues when things tend to go according to schedule. So when everything is sort of happening the way that I intended it to, it's usually a good day. And when they don't, it's a struggle for me to continue to think of it as a good day, and until I sort of shift my perspective. So today's a good day so far.
I love it. So again, I want listeners to understand that I don't know LaToya at all. She's a stranger who came into the room. I met her maybe 3 minutes before we went on air, but I didn't really meet her. I just saw her. We spoke a little bit about what might go on here. And I want you to hear how beautifully open and real she is already with me. And I want to just ask you if we can debunk the myth that it takes a certain amount of time for somebody to be honest and open with you. We don't know each other from Adam or Eve. And yet I just asked her a simple question, and look how honest she was with me. Look how vulnerable she showed up. And look how beautiful that is. Do you have that ability to be that vulnerable listener with the people around you? Do you have that ability to be that open? Do you have that ability to share? Because if you do, then this world is a stranger waiting to be a friend just right behind the turn. There is no stranger anymore. We're just friends waiting to happen. What makes you happy?
I have, I think, two layers of things that make me happy. There are the sort of external things that make me happy that deal with work. I love checking off lists. I love accomplishing goals. I love recognition and acknowledgement. Uh, those are the things that I love.
Yeah, I did okay, all right, right? No, I didn't
Yeah.
even know.
And then there's other things that make me happy, like secret things. Like I like watching people. I know that sounds weird. I like, not in a stalkery way or anything. I don't like to watch people in super private moments, but like in those moments where people are public but they think they're private. For example, if I'm on my morning walk and I see someone like step out of their door and they like take a drag of a cigarette, and then the sort of like relief that they have, or like, you know, a coworker outside of work walking their dog, you know, those sort of moments where I'm sort of surprised.
Right.
And I get to see people in their sort of public private self. I find really interesting. I think that's probably one of the reasons why I decided to go into acting. I'm an actress, and I like sort of dissecting that stuff
Yeah.
from words on a page and sort of creating stories around it. Um, and so, yeah, that makes me really happy. Dreaming makes me really happy, like literal sleep and also daydreaming. I always daydream about traveling and just leaving like with my family up, you know, to a different country and just sort of backpacking, you know, for a little while. I need to have like my, I know I'm coming home security, but
Right.
sort of just letting it go. I daydream about that a lot,
I
and
love
that
that.
makes me happy. Yeah.
And what would you say is most important to you?
Legacy. I want people to remember me as someone that they enjoyed having in their life, that hopefully made a difference in some way, in a positive way, that someone that evoked thought, and someone that helped them awaken things that are important to them. So I would love to sort of hold my small little corner in that space. That's really important to me.
Wow. And do you have any thought that that is not who you are? Why is that so important to you?
It's important to me because I know that, first, I know the people that inspired me, right? There's no way that I could be where I am today without someone believing in me, or giving me a tip, or like taking the time to talk to me or show me their path, whether that's directly or, you know, the books that I read, the podcasts, everything. So I know how it's affected me, but also I know that one day I'm not going to be here. And I hate thinking about that part of it, but you know, if in some way I can sort of live beyond my physical self,
Yeah.
I I would like to live in that space of people appreciating that they met me in some way. So that's why it's important to me.
There's so much that I would like to burrow down into that, but I don't know that I'm going to do it right here. Because it's always interesting to me when it's so important to people to have people think well of them or remember them well.
Mhm.
I walked into it a little. I'll walk in one more step.
That's okay.
How do you think about yourself? Do you feel do you have do you honor your own legacy of yourself in yourself?
I do. I think it's been a really long road. I mean, life is like the longest thing that you can do, right?
Maybe, maybe.
At least that I'm actually aware of.
Okay.
Um, but I've always had a certain self-esteem,
Yeah.
and like a sort of knowing that whatever's happening in my life at this moment isn't it.
Isn't
Um,
it?
yeah, is not it.
Wow.
Like I used to pray at night, and you know, when I was younger, we had a rough time. We were living in shelters, and we never had a stable place to stay. We were always moving, and sometimes we didn't have enough food, et cetera, et cetera. And so coming, I guess there were a couple of things that sort of got me through that. And that was believing that there was something bigger and better out there for me. in some way I had to believe that I had something inside me that was worth the world having me. And so I would think like I'm special in some way. I thought maybe when I, like on those movies, you know, I'd wake up on my 18th birthday and someone would be like, you're really a princess or
Right,
something like that.
right,
um, and even before I, you know, learned how to sort of put this face on in terms of makeup and looking a certain way, I really valued my personality a lot. I used to always think, no matter what I look like, I have a great personality.
right, right, right.
And I was kind of just born with knowing that, um, even when the outside um, didn't reflect that towards me, should I say?
Yeah,
Um, and I can't thank a person for that. I know there's been reinforcement throughout my life, through certain people, but I just think that it was given to me by God and the universe, to just sort of have that self, actualization. So,
yeah,
yeah.
beautiful. So there were a couple times where you made statements like it would have never happened without.
Hmm.
And I would just
Interesting.
invite you and the listeners to find those moments where you make those statements
Hmm.
and just invite the question of, is that really true?
Hmm.
Or is that just a story that we tell ourselves? Because I can tell you from my own belief system, I've created so many of those. This could have never happened without me going through this pain, or this suffering was important for me to be here. Um, that what it laid the groundwork for was the foundation for me to have to cause pain and suffering for me to grow in the next stage, because it wasn't there and I could have naturally just walked through it without any of it. And I just wonder how much the Mosaic has showed me over the course of time that our thoughts become our words make up our stories, and our stories create our life. And if we change any of the components of any of those things, everything in that equation changes. So what if there could have been another way for that to happen, not only for then, but as you move forward into the future? Just an interesting thing to ponder.
I believe that.
Yeah.
I do. Um, it's something that I'm learning, I'm growing in, sort of thinking of different possibilities.
Yeah.
Just coming from, you know, the life that I've had, I have a pattern of when there's trauma, I sort of get through it and there's positivity on the other side. And so I think sometimes people that are similar to me, we get addicted to the cycle of even sometimes creating bad or trauma so that we can get to the other side, and feeling like that there's not one without the other. You
Yeah.
know, they say light versus dark and trauma versus not, all of that. And so that's something in me that I'm trying to learn to see that it's not necessary to have
Yeah.
happiness. Like, you don't necessarily have to go through pain to get to the other side.
I love that.
And that's probably one of the hardest lessons that I'm trying to overcome, for sure.
My wife and I did a workshop in Jamaica, and we were working with the government of Jamaica at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a lot of issues around trust. They didn't trust each other. So we realized we have to do something to sort of enhance the trust that they feel for each other. So during lunch one day, we set up an obstacle course, and we got blindfolds, and we took the people who trusted each other the least, and we put them together as partners. And we told them we were going to blindfold one of them, and the other one was going to walk them without touching them, just through their words. They were going to walk them through this course to get them to the other side. What I didn't say to them is that to the far right, there was a column with nothing in it. I just told them their mission was to get the people from where they were to the other side with the least turmoil possible. But because it was set up as an obstacle course, because they believed that life had so many obstacles that they had to overcome, nobody saw the clear path to doing that. Nobody walked to the far right and said, I'm just going to walk you, turn right for 5 steps, go straight for 20 steps, and you're on the other side. They all laboriously put them through, some stumbling over chairs, some stumbling over tables, some stumbling over things that were on the ground that they couldn't see. And they got through, and they all celebrated. And we were all fabulous because they trusted the people and they got them through. But then I said, did any of you happen to see that on the far right? Come here for a minute. And they said, no, because we didn't know that that was possible. I so often think that's how life is. Mm. That if we see everything, there's a clear path for us, but we just are so used to walking through the tragedy and the adversity that we find that to go through. And then we celebrate getting through it and say there's no other way that could have happened. Right? Do you think that do you think the world listens to each other? To people in the world, do you think we listen to each other? Do you think we hear each other?
I think we hear each other. I don't think we listen enough.
Yeah. So why do you think that is? If we hear each other, we don't listen to each other?
I think a lot of it has to do with perspective and also being in a place to actually listen. So for example, if I were to go into a different culture and see something I'd never seen before, and from my point of view, it's terrible, whatever it is. I don't know. They drink water directly out of the river. Why would you do that? You should use a cup, whatever it is. It's not proper, and instead of taking the time to understand why and sort of be still in that space, we sort of go to correcting all the time.
Yeah.
I know that I have that tendency just as a person. So, especially with all of the turmoil happening in the world, I think there's a lot of people talking and not enough listening.
Yeah.
I think that if we took the time to immerse ourselves in someone else's world and sort of are uncomfortable in that for a while, we would start to see a little bit more similarities and understanding. And I think we'd realize that we're all, maybe not all, but most of us are sort of wanting the same thing. We just have different ways of getting there. So
how about you? Do you feel like you're a good listener?
Sometimes.
What differentiates one time from another? What makes sometimes you listen really well or good? I'm not sure what the proper English is there. I think it's listen well, listen good. I don't know. And other times not so.
I think it's the stage that's set a lot of times. Like, for example, I don't know you. And in the beginning, you set such a beautiful stage. And I knew sort of going into it that I could just be open and that I was here to listen. I was prepared for that. For example, sometimes, with my husband, if we're having a disagreement, and I'm not in a place of listening, it's like this. We have strong personalities and strong beliefs and strong ways of doing things. And if one of us doesn't give, well, in a way, we both have to give, right? Because if one of us is always giving, then that's a disaster waiting to happen as well. But I know that I have to also be in that place. I have to be in that place of letting go. And a lot of times it's difficult for me to do that, especially when I just know I know the answer.
Right. No, totally. I can so totally relate to you, and I so again appreciate your honesty. And I have to say to you, I believe you and I trust that you're telling me the truth. And yet my experience of you so far in the 25 minutes that we've been sitting here talking is directly opposite of the experience you're telling me of yourself. Because I find you very open, I find you very receptive, I find you very vulnerable, I find you very, compassionate here in this space with me. And so, and yet I know with my brother, for instance, who's my closest person to me, or one of my closest people, he and I just know how to get under each other's skin, and if all he really wants for me to do is just listen to him and love him. He just wants to be loved and accepted, just like everybody else. He might not say that. If he hears this, he might go, don't use my name like that. I don't want you to, but that's all we all want.
Mm-hmm.
And he just wants to be listened to and heard. He wants me to just acknowledge that what he's saying is what he's saying. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I just can't do that. And I'm this great, so to speak, listener. Here I have a room where I listen to people. But in my day-to-day life, I hope this leaks over to that, because there's so many times where I just am not able to do that for whatever reason I get in my own way.
I think the challenge for me comes in the expectation of when I'm heard, what the right answer is. Does that make a sense? So
No.
if I explain that 1 + 1 = 2, okay, we both agree that 1 + 1 = 2. And because that's 2, it should be yellow, or whatever it is.
I got you. Okay.
You know what I mean? Okay, we get this. Okay, so the right answer is
yellow.
And whatever. And I think that there's levels, right? There's like, okay, creating the space, and then there's coming, as two people to, commune on whatever the issue is. But after we're heard, then what? So for some people, just being heard is enough. And that's okay. And then for other people, they want to be heard, but they also want to be agreed with.
I see. So is it, I'm 65 years old. In my ancient years in this world.
Oh, please.
I don't think anybody has ever demanded that I agree with them. They've wanted me to agree with them sometimes. But when I have loved and accepted them and listened to them and heard them and acknowledged and validated them for what they're saying, they also give me the right to have my own belief systems. Some of my friends have the most cockamamie beliefs you could ever imagine. I would never be able to believe what they believe. But if it came to the point where they were in danger, I'd take a bullet for them, because I just love them that much. What is it about being heard that has the follow-up step of, now that you hear what I'm saying, I need you to agree with me?
I can speak for myself.
Please, if it can.
I am goal-oriented in a lot of ways. That's what's gotten me through my hardest times, right?
Yeah.
And so when I'm in a conversation, I'm just going to keep using my husband, and we're having a disagreement. At the end of it, I'm thinking, okay, so we both get each other, but what are we going to do now?
Right.
Because just getting each other and just communicating this over and over again is not solving the problem. So what is it that we have to do differently? And we also have to agree on that, because if we don't, it's not going to work. That's how, that's what I think, when we're trying to solve a problem. Yeah.
So
looks like.
So stay with me, and I appreciate you, because this is so, I can only imagine how many people listening are going through this with us right now as we're speaking, right? Because it makes so much sense that if you've heard me and you acknowledge me and you validate me and you understand why I'm saying it, that we will come to a conclusion that we both believe is the right conclusion, and we will do that action together.
Mm-hmm.
But what if we don't? What if we come to different conclusions to figure out how to bring peace to the situation or whatever it is that needs to happen, that is neither the way you want to do it or the way I want to do it? What if there's a totally new possibility? Like, let me try and story it a little bit, okay? I find the world lives in very neat silos of like-minded people.
Mm-hmm.
We all believe a certain way. We like when we're with people that believe like us, to see the world like us. It's very comforting. It's very, like I remember the first time I found like-minded people in my life, it was like, oh my God, I thought I died and went to heaven. I couldn't believe there was anybody as crazy as I was that believed the things that I believed. And I didn't need to defend myself and rationalize and argue for the points of view. These people got me. And that was so beautiful. But I think it's Ecclesiastics that says for every time there's a season, and a season for every purpose under heaven. And it feels like that time of like-minded communities is getting smaller. It's time for it to end. Because the silos we're living in are wider and stronger. But the gaps between them are getting wider and deeper too. And now we're yelling at each other from one silo to another. All we have to look at is our political conversations. We're not listening to each other. We're just yelling at each other. And we're not making any headway. We're not agreeing on anything. You want to do this. I want to do that. We both want to solve this problem. We agree that we want to solve the problem, but your way of doing it and my way of doing it is not going to work. And we're at a standstill. But what if we rose above what you want to do and what I want to do and tried to figure out what do we want to do together? What if the sides came into the middle? What would the middle look like? How would it be where there's nobody on another side because there is no other side to be on? We're both together in the middle. We're connected like pieces of a mosaic. What would that look like in those conversations with, we're going to just say your husband because it's the example we're using, but with any conversation?
Well, I mean, it sounds like at the end there has to be something new.
Right.
You're bringing two things together, so it's sort of creating something different. I don't know. I think depending on what it is, I'm pretty good at compromising as long as it's not harmful.
So the place I want to talk about, pardon me for interrupting, is
Yeah.
less about compromise and more about innovation.
Okay, got you.
Okay.
Creating something new.
Because in business, if we stay doing what we always do, we're gonna be passed up because there are other people that are innovating and doing different things.
Yeah.
And it's the beauty of the unlike mind that allows us to innovate together. Because when we see what we always see, we're going to do what we always do. But when we bring somebody in who sees that same thing entirely different, and we say, whoa, I can't believe you see it that way. And instead of fighting them, we say, like, show me, let's look at this together and see what we see together, with me seeing it through my eyes and you seeing it through yours. What do we now see? What is this new creation that we have? That's innovation.
Yeah.
But too often we say, well, you get what I'm saying, right? Yeah, you accept that that's what I'm saying. Now, why don't you agree with me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a million ways that we could go besides what you say and what I say. These are questions. I mean, I'm just interested in your answers.
I think that there's a level of excitement to do that.
Yeah.
That sort of has to be there. And I think that's why therapists and sort of third-party mediators exist, right? Because sometimes we get so locked in our own way that it takes a third person sometimes to be able to really see both sides without all of the coloring. Of course, they have their own perspective, but and sort of help two parties come together.
Yeah.
and create something new. Yeah. And like I said in the beginning, you sort of have to set that stage for that to happen and go into it with excitement instead of dread. And like, okay, and if we know at the end, like at the end, we're just going to come up with something brand new. It can't be one of mine or one of yours. I think that'd be helpful as well. But yeah, I think that's why therapists exist.
And with all due respect to therapists and not wanting to demean them or make them unnecessary, what if even, there was a company that wanted me to work with them. Their name is Vistage. And they take CEOs that are successful and have them run groups with other CEOs. And one of their bylines that they say, which I loved, I wish it were mine, but it wasn't, it's theirs. And so I give them credit for it all the time, was when you come into these circles with us, what you think is we're going to answer your questions. But what we're actually going to do is question your answers. I love that. I ended up not working with them, but I think I was with them just for that moment to get that piece, that nugget. What if we started to question some of our answers? What if that wasn't the reason why therapists were here? Because we're totally capable of sitting with people that we love and adore. I mean, I love and adore my brother, for instance. I just have to get myself out of the way so that I can let my love and adoration for him speak. I'm sure you do that with your husband also. And I'm sure there are moments where you know there's nothing better than the feeling of being with him.
Well, for sure.
Right? And there are moments where it's like so difficult you want to just kill him, right? Like just like everybody else, because that's what happens in relationships. But what if we knew that our love was bigger than that? That our love was safe enough for us to trust in us, to guide us to a place that was neither mine nor yours? What would that allow us to invite into our relationship that would make it exciting and fresh and alive and real and vulnerable?
That's a great question. And I don't know that I have an answer for it now.
Yeah.
It's something I think that I have and I will, it will, whatever that answer ends up being today, I feel like it'll keep evolving.
Great.
Because I know that I'm changing, and I know that the people I have relationships with, they're changing as well. And what maybe works today may not work tomorrow. And I have to accept that. I think we all have to accept that if we still want to keep our relationships. But I don't have a cookie cutter answer for it, which is big for me to say, because I love having the right answer, but I don't have the right answer because I haven't gotten there yet.
I love that you can do that, especially with the frame of mind you have of wanting to have it all sort of worked out, because you're really doing what Vistage told me to do, which was question your answers now. And so thank you for going there with me and trusting me enough to go there with me.
You're very welcome. Thanks for asking. It's going to give me something to think about, for sure.
If you could tell the world something that you've never been able to say to them before, what would you want to share now, knowing that this audience is here listening to you without judgment, without any sort of other thought, but just eager to hear what you want to say to the world? What would you say to it?
I would say there's a lot. Honestly, I realize the more that I learn, the more I don't know. The more I know, the more I realize I don't know. I know that my perspective colors how I see things, my life experience. But one thing that's sort of helped me through is having empathy and the ability to, for example, see someone in pain and think, what if that were me? Or, I wonder how my words affected that person. It's allowed me to in some sense, be the bigger person and apologize, even in instances where I'm not even sure I needed to.
Yeah.
And sort of like come back and say, hey, do you remember that thing that happened 3 years ago? Yeah, that sucked.
Yeah.
um, I think that if we had more empathy for other people that think differently than us, that we would be able to live in a lot more harmony. Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I love storytelling in all the different mediums, is because I can sort of see things from multiple angles and multiple perspectives.
Yeah.
And I always, no matter what I do, I never want to lose that ability, because I think that's a big key in us all getting along and trying our best not to hurt one another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you would love the Mosaic. Just as a side note, I would love to hear if you read it and hear what you think of it, because I think it would resonate with you a lot. So let me ask the flip side of that question. What, if anything, do you think the world is trying to say to you that you haven't been able to hear until this moment?
I think that the world saying a couple things.
Please.
I think the first thing it's telling me is to get out of my own way. I think I make things harder for myself, and it's that addiction to hardship and pain that I've grown up with. I think the world, the universe, is trying to tell me that what I want, I already have, and I need a shift in perspective. And there was something interesting that I learned this year. For example, 2020 has been crazy, right? With coronavirus,
Oh my God.
COVID-19, police brutality, just craziness, people, political unrest and things like that. And there was a moment where Los Angeles, the air quality was terrible because of all the fires.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, oh my gosh, because I have a job that I go to, and, you know, I was waiting for, you know, the person that makes decisions to say, no, nobody come in, it's too dangerous. I was waiting for permission, right?
Right.
And they had given some options. They're like, if you are affected by the fire, you can do this, et cetera, right? But everyone was like, no, I have to keep coming to work. And I thought, no, I don't.
Right.
I'm like, they like where I work was so gracious, and for the people who were affected by the fire in any way, they were offering like stipend for food. I mean, you weren't, they were offering pay, they were offering all of these things. And for some reason, all of us decided that we needed to suffer through it.
Wow.
Until I said no.
Wow.
And I'm the only one in my store that took my family. We went on a road trip to Kansas City, Missouri for 3 weeks and enjoyed the fresh air. And I came back, and I know that there were some people who were feeling some kind of way, like, oh, I can't believe she did that. She left all of us,
Right.
as if they didn't have the choice themselves. And I was so proud for doing that. And I realized this year, like, oh my gosh, like, there's so many more options.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think we make decisions based off of what we want the outcome to be, right?
Yeah.
Like if you've ever worked in customer service, you'll be like, well, you have option A, B, or C. And they'll be like, well, you're not giving me any options. And I'm like, actually, I am. You just don't like it.
That's all right.
You just don't like what I'm saying. You just don't like what that's going to mean for you. You know, and it's like, I'm starting this year to think in that way. You know, what is best for me? What is best for my family? And there are other options. And if I go down this other path, you know, one, what is waiting for me on the other side, but also just knowing that I can.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need
Yeah.
someone to tell me that it's okay. And that's been one of the things I loved so much about this year. It's like making those off decisions and kind of just rolling with it and realizing like there's not just three options. There's so many.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the heaven that Mo found in the Mosaic that he was looking for wasn't a place with a guy with a better beard than mine who looked much better than I do, with a big G on his sweatshirt, and in some place that, you know, angels hallowed around. It was literally that moment where perception changed, where something we had always seen one way, suddenly we were able to see it a different way. That to me was the heaven that I sought, because we're so stuck in these thoughts of this is the way it has to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you accept me and you acknowledge me and you hear what I'm saying, then you should have to agree with me to just sling it around to you again. But there are so many other possibilities in that equation that possibility doesn't allow us to embrace, right? And they're all right there. It's like that picture that they show of the old hag and the socialite. They're in the same drawing, right? They both exist right in the same place. But when you see it one way, you can't see it the other way. You just can't. I saw an old hag and I said, my friend said, don't you see the young girl? I said, what are you, crazy? You can't call that a young girl. I mean, you know, enough with being politically correct. That's an old hag. And they said, no, there's a beautiful woman there. I said, no, come on, don't give me that Pollyannish BS. I mean, that's an old beat up woman. Right? Until my perception shifted and I went, oh my God, I see her. And that was in the same exact picture. So it showed me that what I see is actually blocking me from seeing what else is there. And that happens in every aspect of my life. And that shift of perception is a magical moment.
Can you feel that happening
Yeah.
when you shift perspective?
Yeah.
I feel it in my brain. I know
Yeah.
that's a strange, like, it's like my brain goes, and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. I actually felt it happening in this room right before you said that.
Oh, wow.
And so it's just interesting to watch just the things that are happening all around us that we take for granted. But there's magic that happens. And it just comes from this beautiful person that I get a chance to sit with for a few minutes, who under any other circumstances, I would have never known you existed. But now that I know you exist, I feel like you're my sister. I feel like you're a friend from 1,000 years ago that I just am getting to meet for the first time again. And how is that possible? Because most people think the world is full of strangers and we're scared to go out into a world where people are strange. But the world's full of friends just waiting to become friends. All we have to do is take a moment to reach out to them and listen to them and tell them we're here for them and we don't want anything from them. We just want to hear what they have to say. And where they trust us enough in doing that they actually show up as vulnerably and real. And we get to know another person. And we see that person's just like us. That's why I end every podcast in the same way that I do this one. Reach out to someone who you think's a stranger. And just go up to them and ask them how they're doing. That could be in person, it could be online. Just say, I really care. Most of us ask, how are you, as a salutation. Mm-hmm. We don't give a damn about how you really are. We just say, how are you? Fine, good, great, and we go on. Mm-hmm. But when you actually ask it as a question where you really want to know the answer, it's amazing what happens for people. It's amazing when they feel the space that they're loved and cared for, that they're not going to be fought with. They're not going to be, you're not thinking about what you're going to say while they're talking. You're just listening to them. And if it can happen with two strangers in a room, surely it can happen with our spouse or our brother or our kids or our boss or our employee or our advocate across the room who thinks politically different than we do. And I believe at the heart of that union is innovation. And innovation is the most dynamic thing that happens in this world. It's where two becomes one. Where we see differently, and then suddenly something new that we see the same. How fabulous, right?
Yeah.
LaToya, thank you so much for being here. We're going to list all of your contact information in the show notes, but if someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the one surefire way they get you?
Instagram for sure.
Okay. So we'll highlight that in the show notes. I want to thank you so much for being here with me, for being not the person you described yourself as, but being the person that you actually are. If that makes sense to you.
It does.
It's such a pleasure to get to know you and to see you and to have the honor of allowing you to see me and having the honor of being someone that you show yourself to. For you listening at home, how long did it take? A few minutes? Reach out to people you don't know and get to know them. Thank you, listeners, for listening. Thank you, LaToya, for being here. Before we go out, is there anything you want to just say before we leave?
No, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed listening to you, listening to your thought patterns and your perspective. And I think this is really cool what you're doing. And I'm looking forward to listening to some more.
Thank you so much. It's my honor. And I hope this will not be the end of our relationship with yourself or your husband. I love both of you guys very much. So hopefully there'll be more to follow in this as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you again for being here. Listeners, thank you again for listening. Until the next stranger comes into this room, be kind to each other and be kind to yourself. Ciao.